Up to you, Herbert and Thomas.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Tell me if you see my screen.
Can?
Okay.
I think it's not the full screen mode, it's the PPT.
Yeah, now
Ah, there you go.
there's a little echo, actually.
I ask everybody that's not presenting to mute themselves. And so we go.
Okay, let's get started. So yeah, welcome to this user group meeting. This time it's about the continuous integration and continuous delivery. It's a deck that I prepared together with a whole set of people. I want to highlight Sharika and Thomas and Antonio. And actually, we prepared this deck initially for a couple of customers who were asking, actually, can DX do CI/CD well? And if so, how does it work? So I started building out some draft decks, and after a while I realized that I was learning a lot of new stuff, and it is maybe a good guidance for anyone to understand how you can do CI/CD with DX. And what we like to do in this deck is I give you a quick introduction, of course, what is CI/CD and especially on DX. Then I'm going to go through all the different parts of the DevOps, so development, build, test, deploy, and operations. And then I want to focus a little bit on the best practices. We'll go over this rather quickly. The deck I will share with the team. And the idea is also to get your input on the best practices. Do you apply these best practices? Do you have better ideas? This is ongoing work. I think it's a pretty good draft to get started with, but we are very interested in your feedback to see how we can further improve this. So if you have any questions, put it in the Discord channel of CI/CD, or put it here. In the CI/CD, you have the advantage in Discord. You have the advantage, of course, that it will be persistent. So also new customers who didn't attend this meeting will be able to benefit from this. So in the introduction, if you look at the DevOps, so in the development, you of course have the capturing of the requirements and build it all up. Then you start developing it and building it and making versions of it and storing it in a Git. Then you do also a kind of testings, and then you'll be able to stage it upwards to your production server, have the possibilities also to undeploy and roll it back, and you have some operations around that. And if you look at CI/CD, it's about continuous integration and continuous delivery, okay? And actually what we also want to cover is continuous feedback. But that is not really the scope of what we have in here, even though we're going to talk a little bit about the operations. If you look at the full flow from dev to ops, you see that there are a whole set of tools in the market that we benefit from, that we can actually work with. I'm going to highlight several of them. And we're going to discover these a little bit more in detail when we move on into the deck. But the idea is that you want to be able to deliver fast and low-risk releases, that you want to lower the cost around all this management of the development, testing, and deployment, and things like that, improve the quality, and of course, get better products and better solutions actually that run on these products. And so we have the flow that you want to increase the feature readiness, you want to be able to deliver faster new demands from the business people to them. You want also the environments to become production-like, and you want to be able also to get quick feedback on what you have delivered, to react on that, so the whole environment gets more agile. And then, of course, with this experience, we have the advantage that it really allows you to have a good synergy between IT and the line of business. So the goals that we have ourselves with DX is really to give you a simple, simplified unit interface for all the tasks around CI/CD. And we also want to help you to integrate the processes to automate the infrastructures, okay? And with a minimal footprint. And hopefully throughout the deck, it will become a little bit clear how we are trying to achieve these goals for you. And to explain CI/CD, very simply, I want to start with a very simple case. You have two environments. You have a development environment, and you have and then in development environment, you're building your sites, the pages. You have a DCM library in which you can actually include script applications, search components, personalization, segments, and things like that. You got your content library. You may have your digital assets in the digital asset manager and other artifacts. Okay, and if you want to move this over to a production server, you want to have the same information over there, right? So what are the ways to get the information there? Well, if you look at everything which is in a library of WCM, it's simply syndication. If it's digital assets, today, actually we share the environment between the different environments. Okay, so there's a configuration you can do to make sure that the digital assets are used across the environments, and this will improve over time. And if you look at the other artifacts, well, basically we use for that the DX client. But the DX client, that new tool that we have since CF19, is actually interesting because it does not only allow you to manage the other artifacts, it also now allows you to trigger the syndication. So it can fully process most of the simple tasks that you typically have to get anything from development to production. Okay, so that is a very simple process. I lay down this process also in a table. So here you can see we have all the standard artifacts that you want to manage, and most of them you can actually manage through DCM. So you can then put it in DCM libraries. And I point here a little bit out again what parts then you actually manage in there. And if you think about search components, we are talking about the search query that you can manage in DCM, and also the search results in the search component. Okay, so this is a nice way to control exactly how the look and feel of your search should look like. And you see that the DX client can manage either the replication parts or the artifacts. And there are other ways actually to build those artifacts. Yeah, so if you look at, for example, the web content, you can do a GCR import and export to get those resources, or the same thing for a script application. So for most of these things, we have simple ways, tools to allow you to get those artifacts, to package them, to put into a Git or a source control system, and then package them to a new environment. And you see actually for the replication, we have next to syndication for WCM libraries, we have another tool called the PZN Publish, which actually manages the other rules than the segments that you can directly manage into a WCM library. Then the next part is we have other tools that allows you advanced control. Yeah, and I'm going to walk through those tools a little bit later on, but we have tools with Webdav control, XML access, portal scripting, WAS scripting, APIs, of course, and even file copy. And if you can see, for example, the digital assets today, the way actually to manage the digital assets is with the APIs. But of course, we'll make sure that we make it simpler for you to manage those as well. And the final chart is also showing advanced resources, because in some cases you want to build maybe Java portlets or Java applications and do some WAS settings and shared WAS libraries and do custom on WCM, like custom workflow actions or custom GSPs or anything like that. So for that, we have, again, some of the tools that allows you to do that. So in some cases, we can use the DX client for the portlets now. And what we want eventually is actually the DX client is able to cover everything for you. Yeah, so we're not there yet, but this is work in progress and process. And the artifacts, this is something we can actually put into a simple package, which we then simply can deploy with a solution installer. Okay. If you then look at a more advanced environment, so more than two environments, here is, for example, a combination of development and then integration, staging, and delivery. And actually in delivering, we even have authoring and production. Here you can see we can combine it. Yeah, so we can use for the WCM libraries, again, replication for syndication. The rules can be used with the personalization publish, and the artifacts can be packaged, for example, into smaller packages like PEAs or others. And again, we can use the solution installer to get those installed on the next environments to test them. And if it's okay, then we'll move them further upwards to the environment. And again, both tools can be managed by DX Client. And just a simple example where you see where you can combine again syndication and all the ways of managing the information. For example, if you develop a script application, JavaScript application, which is stored in a WCM library, you can develop it locally and then push it to a developer or a test server. And then actually, once you're happy with that version, you can actually commit it to a Git or source code repository. And then you can have a pipeline that actually pulls the latest code, maybe does some testing around that, and then puts it into a staging and integration server where more people can try it out. And once everything is done, you could use syndication again to get it up towards to your production server. So what are the different development tools that we have? Well, again, if you look at all the different parts, we have a whole set of different editors that allows you to manage all this content. So let's have a quick look at those editors. So for page and page details, you got the site manager to manage the, which is typically used for the business users. There is, of course, also the managed pages, which allows you some advanced topics like managing access and things like that. For the content, you can use the content composer, which is mostly for the business users. But of course, you can also use the authoring portlet, and that gives you access also to the design in addition to the content that you have. For the script applications, you can use the script application editor, of course. For the digital assets, well, you use the digital asset manager. That's an easy one. For the site and site sections, you can use the site builder. So this allows you to build actually a complete site template, which allows you to accelerate the creation of multiple sites which are very similar. And for the theme, you can use now the theme editor, which is part of the latest release that was announced this month, and which you probably have seen the webinar yesterday on how it works. For the personalization, use the personalization navigator, and for the segments, it is just a WCM development item. Okay, so you can use the segment groups there directly as well. Search, you got the manage search, and here you got a couple of links to manage the query and results directly with WCM authoring. And then for the WAS console, you have the integration solutions console, giving you access to security, resources, and other important things that are still managed in WAS. If you then want to do local development, you can use for the script application, you can use any IDE of your choice. I gave a couple of them here that you want. And for the other things which are not HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, like the theme and WCM design, Java, etc. Again, you can use Visual Studio Code, or you can use the REST application developer, which has a portal toolkit dedicated to that, allowing you to simplify the creation of those artifacts. And also you can use Eclipse and more, of course. Then the second step is, how do you do the building of it? Well, so to be able to build it, you need to be able to create a version. So if it's web content based, you can use the web content based versioning. So in a content, you can do a manual version. You can create a workflow action, which is create version, and that could be part of your workflow. And what is important to know is that this workflow can be applied, of course, to the content, which is by default done, but you can also apply to any design, any other item in web content. So you can also apply it to your script applications, to pages, to personalization segments, search components, all the things which can be stored inside of Web Content Manager. Another thing which is important to know is that you can use projects. So with projects, you can prepare a whole set of changes, view that together, and once you're happy with that, you can just deploy that whole project with all the changes that you prepared in that. And another thing that you probably should be aware of is that in the library, there is a possibility to label and version all the items in a library as well. And this is important if you in the future want to undeploy, because in an undeploy you can actually go back to anything which was set to a specific label. Then for digital assets versioning, it's automatic. For personalization, you had this option to do manual version. Okay. And we have some other ways of building that you can find back in the help center as well. So there is some guidance about building ER and WAR files. For the theme, use the minifiers and also minimize the number of resources that should be called to increase performance. Then for building for everything which is around Java, there are a couple of tools that you should be aware of. Yeah, so we have Apache ANT and Maven, and we also have Gradle. These are all tools that allows you to manage your Java resources and to build them, to put them into Git and things like that. And one of our partners, Proficient, has provided a lot of good examples around the use of Apache Maven. Then if you go to testing, you need to be aware of that if you are building your script applications locally, in the Web Developer Toolkit, you have the option to use a local server, which is part of the Web Developer Tool dashboard. And there's also an SP-lint tool, test tool, that you can actually use in there as well. In the favorite tools, there are lots of testing tools available as well, of course, for HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, but also for Java. So I put here a link, for example, on everything around Java for the ones who are still working with that. And of course, if you use the Relational Application Developer Toolkit, there are a lot of testing tools for the portlets that you are using there as well. Then another topic is that HCL has a dedicated DevOps set of offerings available that you could consider as well. So it starts with HCL Accelerate. So this is really about the development, about the value stream management that you may want to manage. We have HCL Compass, we have version Vault, so sort of Git. We have Eclipse-based modeling and development environment for all kind of the creation of those applications. We got OneTest, which actually allows you to do all kind of testing of your applications. We got Launch, and we got AppScan, and these all really help you to manage the DevOps in a more detail. But if I go a little bit in details, if I look at test, the tools that probably could be interesting for you to consider is Accelerate, OneTest, and AppScan. And for AppScan, for example, we have a way to test the security of your Java portlets. And OneTest, it gives you a whole set of an environment to allow you to do the testing of your solutions. Then there are other solutions on the market you can use as well, and you can combine it with what we have. So here are just a couple of them: Appium, JUnit, Selenium. Have a look at those if you're interested. Then if we go to deployment, look at this example. For deployment, we have these different tools like syndication, publish, and others. Let's have a closer look at how this all works. Yeah, so let's start with the DX client. So the DX client is this new solution that we have introduced in 9.5, the CFI 119. And this really helps you to have a command line tool that allows you to script a whole set of capabilities. So it allows you to deploy script applications, to run XML access, to deploy themes, trigger syndication, and more. And probably in a call yesterday, you've seen a lot of new capabilities that have been added again in CF 193, and this is growing. And this tool actually deploys on different environments, can be deployed on Windows and Linux and others. And with a command line, you just have the options to specify exactly what it needs to do. So if it's a script application, you indicate where is my script application, on which server do I need to deploy it, and etc. And here's the list of what we are already managing today. Yeah, so today we can deploy and undeploy a Java portlet. We can undeploy and deploy a script application. We can restore a script application. We can use the XML access to manage pages and portlets. And you see this full list that we have. So recently we also added the restart, the DX server, deploy in ER, and enable and disable syndication. And this list is growing. And these are the capabilities we are considering for the next cumulative fix. But if you have any preferences on what is important for you, let us know and share it with us. Because you are our drivers. And the more we can simplify CI/CD for you with this single tool, the happier you and we ourselves will be. And I just want to go you through the other tools. So if you look at the site builder to deploy it, well, just do an export. And on the other environment, of course, you can do then an import of that. For the WCM libraries, you can use the GCR import and export. And again, we're going to provide you the slides, so I don't want to spend too much time on giving details on that. I just want to go a bit faster so we can spend a little bit more time on the best practices that we have started to define for each of the artifacts in DX. For personalization, you have the export option here, and there's a tool that actually can allow you to do it as well. So there's Cicd load with the export action that you can create, and then of course you can also import it later on. And every time you see, I put a link on the bottom, so you can actually use that link to find more details again. And then we have Webdav for several things. So you can use it to access the managed pages, to the file stores, like the themes. So that's a direct access to the sources on your server. And also everything around the WCM, including the content. Yeah, so this allows you a way to get access to individual files that define, for example, your authoring template or a content or a site area. And if you want to manage that, for example, in a source code repository. Then the Web Developer Toolkit, which is actually using the Webdav, but simplifies you with a couple of command lines to manage, for example, the design of WCM. Yeah, so we have one that actually to synchronize the WCM designs. So you can use your favorite editor to manage the presentation templates, the menu, the HTML in your menu components and things like that. DXsync is for the theme development, SP for the script applications, push and pull, and the dashboard is just a nice UI to allow you to actually manage all those actions with a simple click on this UI that you have here. And it's a free solution. Just download it, get it from here, and use it. Then we have more advanced things you can do with XML access. I gave here some of examples of things you can do with it, but XML access is used to do a lot of things in the environment. For example, to create an export of the full portal configuration. And here you see a list of all the different elements that can be exported and imported, of course. And there are different ways to export and import it. You can, some places you can do it in the user interface of the digital experience. Other places you can use it just in the command line. And this is how an XML page looks like. So here, for example, an example of a page. So you see that it explains, it tries to find out where is the page. It then indicates what application may have been installed there, what portals have been installed there, the parameters, the components, etc. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but use it as a reference to understand a little bit what are the tools that we have and that you can use for that. The release builder is something actually that uses the XML access to compare two different portal installations. So it can actually create you the difference of two versions. So my developer version and my production server. What is the difference between it? And package that all together. So I can then use that to move it upwards to other environments. And there's a config engine, and then the config engine is something that allows you again to do a lot of additional tasks for example, to to import pages or do other things. For very advanced topics, there's also a portal scripting interface. So this allows you, for example, to delete portlets. Yeah, so here I'm looking for all the portlets that are called welcome. And if I find them, I'll delete them. Yeah, so there's a nice ways to manipulate in a more easy way all kind of resources that you have in the DX. And it's Jython or JSON based. And there's WAS scripting. As you know that the DX core is still relying on many things on the web application server. So we can use the web application server scripting interface for that as well. Yeah, and one of the things, for example, is interesting to know is, well, there's a Jenkins plugin for that. But also there's an application server comparison tool that allows you to verify the settings on one server to another server and identify if some of the parameters are not identical. And then, of course, you can use that to correct it and make them identical again. And then, of course, finally, you can use APIs. So we have a lot of different APIs. The most important ones you should be interested in is the ones that actually focus on that are now Swagger based, Experience API, REST API based. So easy to learn by anyone, GraphQL support. And in those, you, for example, have APIs that allows you to create authoring templates, create presentation templates, create content, etc., etc. But also for display assets. So that's another way to have, again, more fine control. And the solution installer, I already talked a little bit about that. It uses a specific format, which is called the PAA. and there are a couple of major functions around it. So you can create initial release, you can deploy it, you can update it, and you can uninstall it. So an important part of the current way of doing CI/CD as well for artifacts that you actually put into resources next to the use of syndication. To help you understand a little bit what is PAA, I created a little slide that shows you how it looks like. And you can see that actually in this PAA, so this is the format. It is actually a folder structure in which you put your resources and your actions. So for example, under XML access, this is the place where you say, how do I install the resource that I have in here? And how do I uninstall it? And it's the same thing for managing the database and other things. Yeah, so it's documented here. There's another place where you find some more documentation on it as well. And this is one of the way to package all the resources into something that you can put in a Git in a more structured format, because you can combine portlets, the libraries for WCM, for example, GSV files, shared libraries, etc., all into one single file. And then syndication, of course. So this is the primary way to manage all the libraries from one environment to another, which can be set up to be automatic, manual, or you can use the REST API to trigger that, or the DX client nowadays as well. And for the personalization, there's the publish. So here you can actually set up the publish server, and you can publish it, and you can set up the link directly between one server and another to synchronize the rules that you have from one to another. And just to let you know, if you want to move from on-premise to container, we have a dedicated page that actually explains the 3 steps that you need to do. So you export the source server, then import it to the new server, the target server, and then once it's imported, you set up the syndication of that. Another way to do the deployment is the use of Jenkins. And you probably have seen that we are starting using this more often. It's the leading open source automation server, and it provides hundreds of plugins. And we have plugins for WAS, but we also have sample Groovy pipelines that actually support the installation of the DX client, but also will give you samples that you can use to use all those capabilities of the DX client, like the deployment of the portlet, script application, use of XML access, deploy a theme, deploy an application, restart DX core, and more. Every time we provide new functionalities in DX client, we want to make sure that they're exposed here so you can easily consume them. You can easily see how they work and just optimize it for your specific needs. And again, look at the URL below here where you will find more details on how it all works. Launch is an offering actually that comes from ACL. Actually, it's the ACL version of Code that you probably know are aware of. The advantage of ACL Launch compared to Jenkins is that it is all low code. It's all drag and drop. Yeah, and there's also a possibility to the process that you're building. It's not for a specific operating system, but it's always the same for Windows and Linux. So in Jenkins, you have to manage the SH and BAT files. Here it's always the same, but if you can also create snapshots and more. And again, if you are interested in any of these tools about from our DevOps team, let us know and we can put you in contact with the right people who can provide you more details on this. And you can use any other deployment solution as well. There are tons on the market. I give you a couple of examples that we highlighted already. Then Undeployment, well, if it's a WCM resource, a couple of things. So again, which applies to everything in WCM. You can use, of course, the versionings. Yeah. So create a version of everything that you have. And for the versions, if you go here, you can actually go back and restore it to a previous version. Or you can apply it to a library. So if you go to the libraries, you have advanced settings. And in advanced settings, you have the option to restore a library by date or by label. Yeah. So this is why applying a version label can be very interesting to control this in a very nice way and to go back to previous versions that you have. Then if you go to digital assets, well, it's very simple. Just do a restore. Yeah, go to the version that you want and make it current. If it's for personalization, use the restore as well. For the DX client, you have different ways to do an undeploy that are available. And the solution install you have seen, you have these uninstall instructions that you can provide into the PAs as well. And then again, in all the tools, you can apply that in similar ways as well. Then for the operations, I wanted to keep it very simple. I just have one slide that talks a little bit about monitoring. So in our help center, there's a lot of information about the possible ways of doing monitoring on our solution. If you deploy it using Sophie, you get additional out-of-the-box monitoring for free, like the support of Prometheus and Grafana. Backup and restore is nicely documented in the help center as well. Installation and installation point us again to the help center and how to do updates for on-premise and container. Here you find all the details of that. So then we get to the best practices. And for the best practices, what we did is we created examples for the most important used artifacts. And in each of them, we give you some instructions in the order of what we think is the right order to do the development, the building, the testing, deployment, and undeployment. So let's get started with the first one. So if you look at the authoring template, well, probably you want your business users to create that authoring template so they can use the content composer. And then maybe you want to finalize it using the authoring portlet, because the authoring portlet has a few more additional action properties to manage that authoring template. So that is more for the administrators and developers to complete it. And make sure you put it in a dedicated master library, a design library. And
also let you know the new content composer is shown yesterday. If you were maybe in the meeting, there is a comparison now for both templates and content.
Yeah, which
between versions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. And then in the build process, so if it's the first deployment and your library is very big, then we actually suggest you to use the export. So export it and then import it in the environment. And once it is imported, then move over to using syndication. That is the easiest way to manage the move from libraries from one environment to another. Of course, you can always still use Webdav as well and put individual ATs into your Git and use Webdav again, then to deploy it. And it's even possible to use the APIs, of course, but I think in most cases, the use of the exported syndication would be sufficient to manage anything in WCM. And we'll see that coming back in the other parts of WCM. So this is the authoring template. The next one is the design parts. Yeah, so the presentation template, all the different components, including search, also segments, taxonomy, the workflow, etc. So in that case, you would use the web content, the web authoring UI to build all those parts. You can actually use the web development toolkit to manage the HTML for some of those components, like the presentation template, maybe some of the components like the HTML component and others. For building, again, you can use, for the first time, you can use the export again, and then syndication and maybe Webdav for further on. For the undeployment, then of course it would be just deleting the library. If it's the first deployment, if you're further on, if you want to restore it, then actually you should restore it in a master library, a master server where your library is actually managed, and then syndicate it back upwards again to your last production environment. Okay. And then if you move on, content is very similar, knowing that just the content can be, of course, created in many different ways. You can use the WYSIWYG in-place editing. You can use the inline editing, where it just pops up in the form and make changes to that. You can use the content composer. And of course, you can always still use the authoring portlet, but I think that is more for the administrators and developers, again, to manage the content. Building is actually the same as all the other WCM parts that we already discussed about. With the difference then, of course, you would have probably a dedicated content library, because you want to separate your content from the design. Also, because if you want to make your solution multilingual, you need to have it separated, because you would have a corresponding content library for each of the language of your site. And then if you go to the theme layout, so you can use any of your tools, any EDI. You can also use Eclipse, RAD, Visual Studio Code, whatever. Building it would be just commit that theme, the code of it, in a code source version tool. You should have a DX test page, maybe in a dedicated site that you hide on the production servers, where you can try out how it works and make sure that you put the base components there to see what works. You can use the mobile simulator for the different devices as well. And if you use the DX client for deployment, here's an example of an XML that you would produce. So you indicate which is the page that you want to, you indicate that it's a theme, what are the parameters that we use, what are the skins that you're allowed to use, and you can use the DX client deploy theme to manage that. You can also use XML access, you can use the other tools as well. And deploying it, it will be just restored to the previous version that you stored in a source code repository. Then for the pages and page templates, you can use, for business users, that would use the site manager to create the pages. The managed pages, again, is more for the administrators, where you have advanced topics. To build it, you can use the page workflow to create a version of it in the portal site library if you use syndication. Or if you want to use XML access, there is an option in the managed pages to export your page. Okay, and then of course to test your page, just use a test server with test content to appear in your page. So here, if you actually do the export, it asks you to export just that page of the hierarchy of the pages, and it stores the XML file for you. How such an XML file looks like. So the deployment is using the DX client with the XML access of that XML file. You find some examples of those XML files in the sample directory, and we're actually adding this to our documentation as well. And you can also use the XML access, and then undeploying it. It will be, again, like we did with anything in syndication, just restore it to a previous version on the master server of the portal site library, and then syndicate it upwards again to your production server. You can, of course, use the XML access with the previous version of it as well, and etc. And then JavaScript applications, use any tool. Suggest to use the Webdav toolkit to do the development locally. Have a look at some of the examples, like the Angular script application that we have, and we are planning to add also a React script application and sample that you can use from. Look at the documentation that you have available to do that. Check for the webinar that we did previously on that to get you started with this. Building, if you use a local development, do a commit. If you are storing it in WCM, just create a new version of that content item. Testing, as we already explained, you can use the splint and run it locally. And for deployment, you have a DX client tool again, deploy script application. For undeploy, you have the undeploy script application or restore script application. If you want to add the application into the toolbar, just make sure that the site area which you want to configure it, that you want to show with all the content behind it as applications in the toolbar, make sure that you add the keyword this to that. And then for personalization development, I use the personalization segments in WCM or personalization UI for the other rules. If it's in WCM, it's very similar again. Just create a version, maybe export it if it's the first one, syndication. If it's in personalization, then you can create a version. You can use either publish or load to manage the resources of that. And for deployment, if it's a WCM, it's always the same. If it's in personalization, you can use publish or load. And for undeploy, you can, in personalization, do restore on the master server, and then again propagate it with the publish or load again upwards to the final production server. Site builder, that's very easy. Just use the site builder, use the export, use the import, and delete it if you want to undeploy it. So I put a little table of the best practices for the basic artifacts. I want to quickly go to a more advanced one, which is the Java. So here you see for Java, we can use any tool, any EDI, Eclipse, Red, whatever, build, use, and Maven, Gradle. For testing, all kind of testing tools you can apply for that as well. Deployment, use DX client, deploy, or you can use the PEA, add it to a page. Actually, in that case, you would actually use an XML access that also not indicates that you have to deploy the application, but also add it to a page, so it can be part of the XML access, or again, put it into a PEA. And undeploy, use the DX undeploy, and remove it from the page. You can actually directly use the XML for the page with an example of the update page for that. A table with best practices for all those advanced topics. I put it in there as well. It would be very interesting to hear your feedback about that, if you have any suggestions on how we can improve this further. But the conclusion I want to give you before we're going to open it up for all of you is that everything in DX can be managed with CI/CD, okay? And you can use your own tools for development, building, testing, monitoring, in addition to the ones that we write with DX. Most of the parts that you typically use can be managed in web content, and you can use syndication for that. But the nice thing is now DX client can control most of the processes. So there is a single simplified user interface for all the CI/CD related tasks. It enables the integration of the processes for DX into automation infrastructures. The platform, the tool actually works on any environment. It runs on Linux, Windows, Mac, etc., with a minimal footprint. And this tool we will evolve to gain full control. And we're waiting for your input. We need your help to help us identify what are the next things that we should be adding to make your life become easier. So with that, any questions?
I also want to emphasize that it's very complete presentation. We try to be as complete as possible here, and if it looks a little bit overwhelming, I mean, most of these things you likely, depending on your use case, you might not even have heard about, and you might never need. But some of them you might apply to you. And as Herbert mentioned, like in development, we're working hard on getting to one tool versus having the other ones, and we're not going to remove any other options, right? So if you're currently really a fan of Davis admin, we're not going to do anything about that at this time. But our goal is to simplify this to get to one tool. Just based on our history, right? We try to be as flexible as possible. What is great because it allows you different options, but it also increases the complexity a lot. So we're trying to get a more central approach with a smaller set of tools, a smaller footprint, and also making it easier, but not necessarily less flexible.
Okay, I think we got Herbert. Do not respect some speed limits with this presentation because it brought 88 slides into a 1-hour presentation. So we have time for some questions. We have this recorded and we will be publishing it to YouTube, I would say in a couple of weeks. So we give participants an heads up on what's going on. And I got the question, Herbert, are we sharing this presentation or?
Yeah, I'm going to share one version in the user group to allow more people to give us input on this presentation. As I said, it is draft. I want to evolve this. It should become part of the upcoming learning management system that we are now starting to build on. That will allow you to more easily enable anyone of your team on DX as well. And yeah, I'm interested in your feedback, and I'm interested to get more input from the field of some best practices that you may want to do different, that you are doing differently, and that you may think actually should be part of this deck as well.
Great. And another question we got, I wrote that to the Discord community, and I think we got the starters for a lot of discussions, because what you covered, I don't know how much it's known by the community. There is so much that we could start a deep dive into each feature and have a webinar about each single feature, I think. So yeah. we got content.
But again, remember, this is what most of our customers probably need. Just syndication. This license, of course, needs to be shared. And for the other artifacts, probably can you use the DX client already. Especially for new customers, they probably want to start with this. And most will not need the more complex things, because the more complex things they typically come from in the past, because in the past you couldn't do the simple things, right? So we had to use it in more complex ways. Nowadays you can do a lot of things with simple script applications and etc.
I also have a service communication about CF 193 and previous ones about the certificate expiring soon, and a new CF 194 being released early next week. Do you think it's worth sharing some detail here, Thomas, Herbert, Daniel, Collins? Give that to me, because that could be impacting. Daniel, do you want to open your microphone and explain what's going on?
Sure. This is Dan, by the way. Yeah. So there's a WebSphere certificate that has been in the past several Kubernetes deployments, right? So 183, 184, et cetera, up to 193. And the certificate is April 30th, I believe, is the last day for that certificate to be
26th.
valid. 26th, thanks. And so there is a document which I shared with you, Daniele, in order to update it manually, or in 194, which is due on Monday, you can deploy that, and then you're good to go, because that's where it has the new certificate.
This affects both Kubernetes and Docker. It doesn't affect anything on premise. And the certificate in question is the one that's being used from ingress, meaning ambassador or whatever you have, to the internal SSL communication to the core container. That's the only one that is affected, that's expiring, and we extend that. And for all we know, you might have already switched it out anyway, but maybe not. So this was just the default one that we included. So this affects both Docker and Kubernetes, and the steps are out there on how to update. But as mentioned by Daniel, we have 194 coming out shortly, where you can, of course, get the Docker container and use that one instead. And what we're doing under the covers when you apply it is we check if you have not replaced certificate. In that case, we update it for you. If you already have replaced your certificate with something custom that maybe is valid for, I don't know, 10 years, we will not touch it. So this might be an issue, or might not, depending on how much work you have put in there so far.
Great.
By the way, all the customers have been notified on this certification topic.
By the way, Thomas, I've also figured out the date on OpenShift. Obviously, the certificate used for the portal route also expired on the 23rd of March.
So all of the ones should get updated automatically with the procedure.
Well, at least not on my OpenShift test deployment I've done. I think it was Tuesday this week.
Mm-hmm.
So when I accessed to the Woodburn Studio, the certificate actually was expired on 23rd of March.
All right, maybe we should take that offline and take a look at that.
Yeah.
Like in our deployments, we did not. Maybe it's due to a custom deployment or slightly different way than we deployed it.
No, just a regular DXCTL deployment.
Okay, we got more work for you, Thomas, and the HCL team. So we should be wrapping up. I mean, I'm just sharing with everybody here. I will cut the video to the presentation. The discussion is private to the participants, and we will keep having all the team, all the participants in the Discord community. So that's the place to ask for whatever question that came to your mind with this presentation.
Yeah, and I'll find a way to share the deck in read mode into your user group. Maybe I'll point a link to a file which I put somewhere else. I'll work with you to get.
Okay, great. We are creating a library of presentations, all the new, so we keep those linked to the site. So we are going to get a better organization about the meetings, the calendar, and whatever updates. But it was good. I think I want to thank you, Herbert and Thomas, and Herbert, for speed of light presentation that we got today. But we have still a couple of minutes if some other question comes up, or we can go back to the Discord community and discuss that. No other questions right now. Oh, there was another question. About integrating the test-driven build with stuff like SonarQube and so on. This is another topic that could make sense in this area. But I think it would take weeks to discuss. So I invite everybody to get these questions to the community and us there, and whoever has an answer or a discussion or an idea, that's the place to go. Okay.
Sounds good. Okay, well, thanks for your invitation for presenting this. And I'm looking forward for your input on how we can further improve it and simplify it. And we'll keep you posted on all the updates on DX Client. And again, let us know what are the next features you want DX Client to cover.
What's the best place, Robert here, Herbert, what's the best place to talk to you? Is that on the Discord, or where would you like to your feedback?
Thomas, let you respond to that.
Sure, Discord's fine.
Okay.
Trying to stay on top of it. Sometimes it's I don't know. I look back and you guys have had like 100 posts. And I'm like, I might miss something, but I guess you can tag in there as well. So
yes, so you can.
Yeah.
So let's continue the discussion in the community then.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Let's close the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Yep. Thank you. Same to you, all of you. Bye.
Thank you, Herbert. Thank you, Thomas.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.